Welcome to the Youth Engage podcast. I'm Brian Brady. This is my first video podcast, and I'm going to focus these podcasts on youth voice and civic engagement, great strategies, best practices, talk to fabulous practitioners, youth leaders, academics, and experts, and just have some fun exploring the amazing work that young people are doing and adult allies as well. The first person on this video podcast, the guinea pig, is Mara Mintzer from Boulder, Colorado, is the executive director of Growing Up Boulder. She has a TED Talk that has had 2.5 million hits on how to co-design cities with kids. It's an amazing TED Talk. You have to go see it. It's only 14 minutes long. And she has been working, leading Growing Up Boulder for the past 12 years, since 2009. I've had the good fortune to work with Mara for the last 6 weeks, and so really excited to just chat with her about her innovations in this field and how to co-design cities with kids, which is kind of a crazy idea. So Mara, tell us a little bit about, I think most people's reaction who are not in this field say, what can kids offer in urban planning? What can an 8-year-old actually add to how to design a park or a school? So why have you seen success with this, and how do you overcome that cynicism?
Sure. Well, I would start for the assumption that most people are skeptical of this idea. And even I was a little skeptical when I first thought of the idea of engaging children and youth and planning their cities, especially the younger kids. But my 12 years of experience doing this direct work and all the work before it has taught me it's absolutely the opposite. Kids design cities that are actually better for all of us. So to give you a little more of a sense of what that means, first of all, kids are extremely creative. I think about when I was working in a corporate office in the 1990s, and we would throw around a koosh ball, or we'd have all these little toys to play with to be creative. Well, kids already come to the table with that. They're already thinking outside the box. So they actually often can come up with some innovative solutions that we may not have thought of. Another piece is that a child-friendly city is a city that's friendly to all. And so an example of that is we worked with children and youth on designing something called the 11th Street Corridor, which is a really steep hill with a roadway with some cracked sidewalks and not very good lighting. And we partnered kids with senior citizens. And
I love that.
Oh, it was so fun. And they were thought partners. And what we did is we said to them, what would it look like if this were a more comfortable, fun, and inviting corridor to use? Well, what happened was the kids' ideas were in complete alignment with the elders' ideas. They both wanted a bench to sit on as they walked up this huge hill because it was exhausting. And around that bench, they wanted beauty and art, nature. They wanted lighting so it was safer, and they wanted uncracked sidewalks. And if we had been able to implement it, and hopefully it will be implemented, it would have met the needs of both groups of people. That's just a few examples. I could go on, but I'll stop for a moment.
Yeah, no, in your TED Talk, you really outlined about 5 to 6 primary benefits. And I'm a youth worker who's mostly worked with high school students and some middle, but you go all the way down to age, little kids. And I know your first point in the TED Talk was that kids stretch your thinking, that we're often thinking about liability, and we just can't get that creative on open spaces and design. What have you seen when you've done this design work, how kids can kind of blow up in a good way the ideas and thought processes of urban planners?
Yeah, one idea that I love, where we heard from very young children, is we were looking at what a transportation master plan looks like. And that seems like a lofty idea. How could you get a 2 or 3-year-old to think about that? But what we did was we strapped GoPros, those video cameras, on the heads of the little kids. And
I love that.
It was so cute. We have photos of this. And then their teachers took them out on a walk to observe from, 3 feet high, what is that experience like? We turned on those video cameras, and what you see is the cars are whizzing past you, and it's really scary. And the kids even said, those drivers saw us, but they didn't see us. Like they're not noticing us here. And that input from those very young children actually helped lead to our city's Vision Zero plan, which is to have all residential streets have their speed limits under 20 miles per hour, because the vision is to have zero serious morbidities or deaths due to cars hitting pedestrians or bikers. That came from the young children.
Oh, I love that. It makes me think of your final quote in your TED Talk from the Bogota mayor about children being the indicator species, that a successful city for kids is going to be a successful city for adults too. And those GoPros help you get at that. You also talk about kids naturally gravitate to fun, movement, and play, and they try to make spaces come alive in that way. Can you give some examples of some ideas that have changed, how adults have changed their thinking and made their spaces more enjoyable?
Yes, well, and one thing that I think a lot about is there's a lot of research that shows for adults too, we need more play and fun in our lives, right? That actually extends
Yes.
our lives if we laugh more and if we have more fun. And so, but I think the kids are a really good reminder for it. So I'm actually talking to you from in my office and I want to show you something. This is the
Oh,
benefit.
great. Yeah. Take us around. Yeah.
Hold on a sec. Okay, so this, and all the examples I'm giving you are from transportation, but we do a lot more than transportation. Wait, let's show you this part. This is a mural that the kids designed. Can you read what it says?
It says, "How many hidden bunnies can you spy?"
Right, so this was a mural that was up on all the buses for a certain bus line in our city. It was designed by English language learner students who studied this particular route for about a half a year. And they decided they made this mural because it was so boring to take the bus. And this was up in all of the buses that they had something to do while they were on the bus. And it was a game you could play with your caregiver, just you had to find all the bunnies they drew.
And if you have a little pre-K kid, it's a numeracy activity as well. Yeah.
Absolutely right. There's all sorts of STEM learning you can build into that. And there's a program called Learning, I think Playful Learning Landscapes in Pennsylvania, where they actually do that. They build in playful activities that also build in all sorts of learning as well.
I know in my years of youth work, there's just projects that kind of blow your mind and stay in your hard drive memory. Tell me about a moment that you were just like, wow, it's the reason you're still doing this 12 years later. You must be, I know you're passionate about this. Give me a couple of those aha moments of where you're like, this is cooler than I thought it would be.
This happens, I mean, I've got the best job in the world because this happens to me every week. So let's see, one of the examples, oh, well, this was cool. I love how kids are teaching me things. We were working with kids on what would a teen-friendly park look like? Because one of the issues is, and this happens, or it happened when I was a kid, right? There aren't places for teens to hang out where they're not constantly being kicked out or told they don't belong there. And our kids were getting yelled at for using the swings. Teens were using the swings on the playground. The parents yelled at them. So we said, what would a teen-friendly park look like? Well, this group of kids I was working with, and this was about 6 years ago, they said, well, we need to have gender neutral bathrooms that anyone can use. Now, this was way before I had ever heard of that concept. Now, at least in Boulder, it feels mainstream. Yeah. But these kids taught me that, well, why would we have a gender specific bathroom? First of all, limits who can use it, right? It's not efficient. But second of all, let's be more inclusive in our city. It just blew my mind. I love learning from them. And that's part of what happens every time you interact with kids.
That's, one of my aha moments when I started youth work was similar. Is we had a mayor who passed an ordinance to prohibit 4 or more young people from standing on a corner. It was an anti-loitering bill, which you can imagine had some constitutional issues. But I was working with some gang-involved students at the time and asked them about it. I was like, that's going to have the reverse effect. It's going to make us want to hang out even more, and it's going to make us more angry at the police. Yes. Immediately I was like, oh, we really should co-design our policies with some input from young people here. Getting back to your TED Talk, another piece I love, I came in, I think, skeptical to the idea of little kids, the 3, 4, 5, 6-year-olds participating in city planning. But you converted me in your TED Talk. And I think you talked about beauty and color. You also talked about just matter to kids. Like they would never have put up little bungalows. Tell me a little bit more about what you get when you gave me an example of teenagers. How about with the little kids? What rocks your boat when you're talking to them?
Well, one thing that's important to know about a lot of our work is it's often happens over a period of time. So we're not just going in once and saying, what do you think, and leaving. We're actually doing a whole process where we're capturing the kids' lived experiences, really valuing where they currently are, and then asking them to do research and stretch their thinking and find examples of best practices or very good practices from around the world, and then synthesize those ideas to share and have a dialogue with decision makers. And so often when the kids come to these places, for instance, kids who have participated in this process, if they come to a city meeting, they are so well informed that they're often better informed than some of the adults, or as informed as an adult. We saw elementary school age kids break through an intractable problem our city had been having. There was a lake that the city had been filling over the years with fresh water. The city couldn't do that anymore. It's very expensive. And the senior citizens living in the retirement community across the street from the lake said, no, don't stop filling it up. And so they were in an impasse. But when the kids met with the senior citizens and they actually had a dialogue about it and talked about, well, what are some points that we agree upon? Well, we both love nature. We want to be able to preserve some water there and walk around the space. They were able to listen. The adults were able to listen in a way they hadn't before, because the kids were, you didn't want to disappoint the kids, like they were wide-eyed and bushy-tailed, and it made the adults more open. Thanks to that, there was a shift in the conversation. They were able to come to a mutually agreeable decision, and the issue was resolved. And it wouldn't have happened without the kids.
Yeah, that's amazing. I think it rings true for me, is that kids can bring out the best in the adults in the room, right? And get them to bring their better angels to a intractable problem. It also reminds me a little bit of the Marshmallow Challenge. I don't know if you've ever seen that video with little kids are better at building a structure out of marshmallows than adults, right? Because they naturally iterate and don't worry about failure as much, right?
Exactly. And also the research shows that they have not developed the rigid structures in their brain for how the world works, which we need as we get older, because we have so much information coming at us. But when you're a kid, you're still developing in that. And that's actually why you can be more creative, partially.
And your background is a little bit in psychology too, right? How did you get into really doing educational work? And you're at the intersection of design and education and youth development. What was your background getting into this?
Yeah, so I come from a family of sort of social activists, and kids' issues were always important, and social justice issues. But I started out my career developing Head Start programs, early Head Start, doing childcare, family childcare work, universal pre-kindergarten. But I became frustrated by how inefficient a lot of nonprofits were. And so I went back to school to get a degree in organizational psychology to help work with groups and help make change. And it turns out there wasn't really a great field for people trying to make money in this in the nonprofit world. So I went back to sort of working on kid and youth issues and working for a city and running what was one of the first community schools around in California, which is where you get support services on a school campus. But what happened was I was able to integrate all that organizational psychology knowledge of change and hearing from the community and group dynamics, and integrate it with my experience working with children and families and systems, and created this job that I'm in today.
It reminds me of the nothing for us without us mantra, right? That's popular in community organizing, right?
Yes.
And And that's you're coming, organizing and design have some pretty common principles, I think, too. Um, Inclusivity is a big part of your TED Talk too, and just how young people are naturally inclusive and naturally, the little kids are about the journey. Like when you were designing a park, you said that they were really interested in just every little piece of the journey in the park, not the destination points. So tell me a little bit more about the inclusivity and also how little kids shift our time, basically our space-time continuum when we're doing planning.
Yes. So the first piece about inclusivity. So one of our goals and metrics is to make sure that 50% or more of our young people that we work with are from historically marginalized groups, because we know that kids already don't have a voice, but we know that kids whose communities have been targeted or not listened to in the past will have even less of an opportunity. And so we make sure to start every project by saying, how are we going to hear from kids who are least likely to be heard from? And I actually will develop what I call an equity matrix to say, well, what are the groups that are most impacted by some of these activities or places, and how are we going to find them? And a lot of that is going where they are and building upon the successes they have. We always start from an asset-based point of view of hearing what matters to our young people, being in a space that matters to them, letting them really guide the beginning of that, and co-creating that process with them and with their mentors. Now you're asking a little bit about the space-time continuum with little kids. They really do force us to slow down. They force us to use all of our senses. So even when you're looking, you can observe babies and how they interact with the space. One of the things that actually is beneficial for babies even is having, or toddlers too, is having sensory gardens and things where they're using all of their senses to experience something. And the other thing that's really fun about designing with and for kids is they make us simplify a lot of the ideas, right? Like they, a complex poster created by the city is just not user-friendly for a young kid. But it turns out that when we've developed materials for younger kids, all the adults steal them and start using them too, because nobody wants to read that much. We're all ADHD in our world. We need to really simplify. And so we found a lot of success for all people using materials that are good for little kids.
Oh, that makes so much sense. Yeah. I love too in your TED Talk where you talk about, just like adults, kids come up with bad ideas that not all of them get accepted. It's not about, every idea is perfect, but it seems like the sense I got is you get specific ideas, but you also get pushed in the right direction by bringing kids in. And then there's just, I call it the triple bottom line of doing good co-creation with young people, which is you get better ideas and policies and design, and you also get young people, the kids who are co-designing are impacted and the adults are impacted. So tell me a little bit about what you see in your evaluation around how it feels and how it affects students' skill building and attitudes being part of this process.
Yeah, so we adapted an existing tool for child-friendly cities, and we took a few of the questions, and it's an assessment. We just have about 5 questions that we do before we do an engagement, and then after we've done a series of engagements. And we do it with the kids, and they actually help us analyze the data as well. And what it asks is sort of like, do you feel like you have a voice in your community? Do you want to have a voice? Like, is this something you're going to continue to do? And we end up finding very large changes between the beginning of the project and the end of the project, especially the more times we've gone in to work with the kids. We also hear from the kids. They want to continue to be engaged. In fact, right now we had a group of kids who helped us run a fundraiser this past spring. They loved it so much that they just are, they're desperate to continue to be engaged. And our hardest part is we're just so understaffed that I don't have the staff fully to be able to run the engagements. We have places that want the engagements. We have kids who are dying to do it because they got a taste of their voices mattering and they don't want to give that up. And so we're trying to make it happen because we know it matters.
That's a good segue to sort of our closing piece here, and I wanted to talk to you about is Growing Up Boulder is in that 12th year of existence. You become a speaker nationally and internationally. Your TED Talk is seen around the world. You're inspiring folks. But we've talked, you and I, about how the practitioner knowledge of how to operationalize co-design needs support. And so I know you and I have talked about creating an institute for child-friendly cities that you can help share your wisdom and expertise on. So tell me a little bit about that idea and how you think that might help and how it aligns with UNICEF's Child-Friendly Cities initiative.
Absolutely. So yeah, as you said, Brian, I actually get an email, or Growing Up Boulder gets an email about once a week from around the world saying, how do we do this work? We were inspired, we've read your writing, we've watched the TEDx talk, we want to do this in our community. And we know that we can't individually do that, but what we would love to do is actually create an institute for child-friendly cities that both teaches people the basics of how to start this work up, no matter where you are, no matter if you've, it takes you to the next level. If you're just starting thinking about this work, how do you plant the seeds for this happening in your community, to all the way of, we've got this great youth council, but we want to include younger kids, or we want to really make this a bigger undertaking for all children and youth. And so we're really thinking about what could that look like, both through teaching, but also creating cohorts so that people who are doing this work can support each other and inspire each other, because we're each other's best teachers. Now, in terms of how it relates to UNICEF's, so UNICEF USA has recently embarked upon real official child-friendly city initiatives. We call ourselves an unofficial child-friendly city initiative, but when you're official, you create an MOU between yourself, your city, and UNICEF USA. And there's a series of sort of parameters you follow of how do you start this. We would love to do this in collaboration with UNICEF USA, both in helping getting cities even thinking about what does it mean to be child-friendly, all the way up through, well, okay, we want to do this child-friendly cities idea officially. How do we do that? And so we're talking with them as well about what could that look like. So we're mutually supporting one another and getting more kids' voices in communities, and really making kids' needs central to all of our cities and communities.
I think, I believe it's such an important next step, because part of why I want to do this podcast is youth work is a craft. And it's not, so you can become a wonderful public official or mayor or city manager, but really not know how to operationalize the concept of child-friendly cities. So I think this podcast, I want to talk to brilliant youth workers like yourself and get the idea out that this is a craft that we need to replicate, and we need to take best practice. So I think your child-friendly cities concept needs support, needs funding. So if I'm a program officer or a caring individual with a little pocket change, how do I help you and Growing Up Boulder become a more viral phenomena and train other people?
Sure. So you can go onto our website, which is growingupboulder.org. And you can do a few things. If you are inspired to give, you can certainly give. There's a donate now button there. You can also contact us. There's an email address you can contact us through. We also have a newsletter, so you can hear what we're up to. And that really helps you learn some of the more nuanced pieces of what we're doing. For instance, we're going to be having a police master planning report, or reimagining policing report, that's going to come out soon, and you'll be able to find that through our newsletter and our website as well.
Oh, fabulous. Well, I look forward to helping you on this journey, and I hope we help create thousands of child-friendly cities in the next couple decades here. I think it's a huge need. So thank you, Mara Mintzer, for doing this first podcast. I'll talk to you soon. Take care.
My pleasure, Brian. Thanks for having me on.